Who remembers doing this back in the day? Anybody besides me ever put a marquee on a page? Sinners! Every one of you. Oh, I rock these all the time. I love these things.
I was 12.
I was older than that when the web was invented, so I lose. But this is a marquee, obviously. And I love the marquee tag. In fact, I have a lot of fun playing with marquees, and I still use them on occasion because they do some very powerful things. For instance, don't do inline styles, but this is a demo, so it is. You can change the font size on them. Huh? How cool is that? Let's just go 40 pixels because, you know, that's what we do here. So there it is. It's bigger. You can read it a little better now. That's kind of exciting. What's that? Oh, don't. Come on now. Now you're just crazy. Don't want to change the color. We don't change colors of marquees here because, frankly, that's the job of the user. That makes no sense. Awesome. But one of the things that the people who bestowed this wonderful HTML tag on us did was he gave us some wacky attributes that only the marquee tag has. For instance, you can change the direction that marquee is going. It defaults to left, but let's just say, for instance, we want it to go right now. And then all of a sudden it's going right, which is not cool since we, read from left to right. It makes it hard. It's an I can't say this backwards. But so right's not very useful to us, but it also give us something crazy. How many of you guys were around when the web first started and all the tags and attributes were supposed to be typed in all caps? Anybody remember that? God, I'm old. I am so old. So yeah, marquee tag, you can have it alternate, but this is going way too slow. Let's speed this up a little bit, shall we? And instead of saying speed, which would make total sense, they decided to name this scroll amount, which, all right, that's fair. And there we go. Now it's going at 50 units per amount of time, I would assume, but I have no idea what those units and amount of time is. But there's our 50 somethings per something, which is great.
The open source website. I like your style.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, in order to have an open source project, you have to do something this bad on the website. I think it's a requirement somewhere. I think I read that in the open source documentation. I can't prove it though. I do not maintain an open source website at this point, and so I don't know, but I have been told that's true. So we've got a marquee now, and of course we're using proper nesting of our HTML because the marquee is such an advanced thing, we need to keep it straight. But you know what's awesome about the marquee tag is it allows us to do something different still, and that is nesting marquee tags. How many of you guys have ever nested marquee tags? Anybody? Anybody? No? Okay, well, let's nest some marquee tags, shall we? Because we don't do that enough. Let's do... Oop, I apologize. This is my wife's laptop. Mine decided to die, and I am refusing to replace it till the new Haswell MacBook Pros are out. So let's put an image in here, because that's the cool part about marquees is you can do all kinds of stuff. This is a nested marquee, for instance. And it's just wacky. Like, what is going on there, right? Who knows? But I think we need to replace this. Because I think that two things should be in every marquee. The first one is an image, and the second one is something that should be on every website, and that's an image of a cat, right? I mean, you can't have the internet without a cat. So let's do... Oh, is there another type of image? And there is our nested marquee with a kitty gif, which is awesome. But there's something else, and this is the crazy part about marquees. They don't get implemented the same in every browser, which surprises me. Let's just jump this up to 20. Maybe it's a little bit more viewable. Yeah, there we go. Hey kitty, bye kitty. Hey kitty, bye kitty. And so that's marquee. But what I want to do is I want to maybe open this up in Firefox, because Firefox actually gives us some functionality that other browsers don't give us. Here's our marquee in Firefox. Now, I'm not quite sure what's happening here. There is E. Yes, by Kitty. And so this is Firefox implementation of nested marquees. As you can see, is not quite the same as Chrome's. And I have no idea what happened to the cat. Oh, there it is. But I have no idea what happened to the words. Hey, there it is again. So the one piece of functionality that they give us in Firefox that we can't get anywhere else, which is a huge bummer. Let's make this a little bit smaller. Style width of 250 because arbitrary for the win. Yes, maybe? Yes. Okay. Well, the one thing that we can't do anywhere else but in Firefox is something that I have also done and am embarrassed by it as well. And I apologize for this, but Firefox is awesome because they let us do this. And that, my friends, is a nested blink tag inside of a marquee. Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit of responsive web design because that's sane-ish. Oh, yes, we could do this. Look, it's flexible. Ooh. Awesome. Well, my name is Josh Broton. I'm the Interactive Design Lead, UX Manager, and Front-End Developer for Vistacom in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We are a unique company in that we cater almost completely to agribusinesses, and most of our clients are of the billion-dollar-plus range. And so, while you think rural and you think, boy, low-tech, and they don't have smartphones, I was surprised to learn when I started working there that there is no tech more advanced than the tech that's in a cabinet of a combine. Have you guys ever seen the inside of a John Deere tractor before? The newest models, the ones that came out last year, drive themselves. You can start them at the beginning of the field. They will harvest the entire field for you and only wake you up if something's going wrong in the cab. They will turn, they will move back and forth, they will do the rows completely by themselves, driven by GPS. Some amazing technology. And so it's fun working for them because we get to implement all kinds of tech-forward things, including we did a website that maps out a farmer's field and points within a square foot what type of seed and chemicals he's supposed to spray on that square foot of his field. And using those techniques with precision agriculture, working with John Deere and Raven Industries, you can get like 40 to 50% more yield per acre using some of that technology. So we get to do some fun stuff. But we also do websites and all kinds of other marketing things for these people. I'm a freelancer. I do design, front-end development, and UX audits when I have some spare time. And I also work for kidblog.org. I don't know if you guys know anything about Kidblog. It's a startup out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's actually the largest educational blog system in the entire world. And so it's a massive blog system. They just hit 3 million users a week ago. 3 million kids blogging, doing awesome things on the web. We're also the third largest WordPress multi-site install in the world. And this next one's confirmable, but I believe it to be the case that we are the largest WordPress multi-site install on a single database. So we're doing some crazy things at Kidblog. I also have a computer science and network security double major degree from Dakota State University in Madison, South Dakota. I blog at joshbroton.com when I find time, and I never find time. And then I do find time to tweet random and offensive things at Josh Broton. Awesome. Here's my warning at the beginning of every single one of my talks. I have to give it because people are continually surprised by it. I don't know why. I have moderate to severe adult ADD. It's bad. And so I tend to get off the rails. If I do that, throw something at me, jump up and down, scream my name, do something, help me get back on track. It's not good. So let's get started. Awesome. This is my test to see how many of you are ADD. So birds of a feather flocking together, which is awesome. What's responsive? Responsive can be broken down into three things. The first one is it's a flexible grid-based layout, a lot like we had in the early to mid-90s. We didn't have widths back then. It just kind of spanned from the left of the screen to the right. The second one is flexible images and media. This is extremely important, as you can probably imagine. When you take an image that's 700 pixels wide and it's set to a static width of 700 pixels, it displays very weird when the viewport's 320 pixels wide. You see about half the image. So it's important to have both flexible images and media. And the third thing is that media queries. How many of you guys know what media queries are? Woo, awesome. Half of you do, half of you are about to learn. Media queries are used to determine the layout of the page. So these three things, if you want to boil responsive web design and development down to the most simplest form, it's not this simple, but if we had to illustrate it, this would be the list that we would use. Awesome. This article, written by Ethan Marcotte, that came out in May of 2010, was the first time the term responsive was used to describe the web design and development techniques that we're going to talk about today. I remember reading this article and thinking to myself that, one, how had we never thought of this before? But two, this guy's way smarter than I am. And three, I can't wait to try this stuff. Because I had been, at this point, already using a smartphone for almost 2 years. I was sick of the web. I was sick of the poor implementation of mobile websites and the frustration that went along with those. And so I felt like this was probably the best solution that we had come up with at the time. But I also remember reading this article. And this article goes back a little further. This was published on April 7th of 2000. Written by a guy named John Alsott. And when I read this article, I remember thinking 13 years ago that he was spot on, but I had no idea what he meant. And one of the things that he said in this article is this: the control which designers know in the print medium and often desire in the web medium is simply a function of the limitation of the printed page. We should embrace the fact that the web doesn't have the same constraints and design for this flexibility. But first, and this is the part that gets me every time, we must accept the ebb and flow of things. So let me ask you a question. What do you think John meant when he said the ebb and flow of things? Any ideas?
Just the fact that things keep changing and you don't know exactly what the situation is going to be. You just have to be ready to deal with it.
That's spot on. And I actually had the opportunity to ask him that exact same question, and that is what he told me. But this is a better question, and this is what I still talk about with people today is what do we see today that's changing the way that people are using the web? Smartphones and other devices, okay. What else?
Becoming more social.
Yes, the web is becoming very social. It never was before. It was always one-way communication. What else?
Open APIs.
Open APIs, absolutely. God, you're a developer group. It's amazing to me. Normally they're like touch, screen size, which is all very true, but you're right. All of these things are changing the way that people use the web. But the best question to ask yourself is this: what is changing the way that you use the web? Yeah.
Don't have time.
You don't have time to wait, do you? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Things are bright and blinky and get my attention because I'm so tired all the time, right? But the reason you ask yourself this question is because we're the cream of the crop, right? Like we are the 1% when it comes to web users, and what we're doing now is what our general users will be doing a year from now. So if we start to prepare for how we want to use the web today, that means when our users are using the web that way, we're already ahead of them. It already looks like we're smart, that we're prognosticators, that we know what's about to come and what's about to happen, and we become the trendsetters rather than people who are being reactionary to changes. This is the reason I started doing responsive design. This is the chart that from April 2009 to April 2012, the percent of Americans who access the internet from their cell phones. As of April 2012, that percent was 53%. Now it's 62%. 62% of Americans access the web from their phone. 55% access it via mobile devices every single day. 31% use their phone as their primary browsing device, meaning they're more likely to look at your website on their phone rather than on a desktop. In 2013, this year, is the year that browsing on mobile devices will overtake PCs as the most common web access device. It's coming, and it's coming a lot faster than you think. Here's a chart that shows exactly what I'm just talking about. Here are some numbers that blew my mind the first time I heard them. There are 480 million Android devices that have been activated. There have been 400 million iOS devices activated. There are a total of 1 billion Windows PCs in use today. Windows has been around for almost 18 years. iOS and Android a little over 4. So the mobile revolution is coming. There are 1.038 billion smartphones in use today. If you don't think that there's a large user base using smartphones, you're crazy. This last year, Q3, was when there were more smartphones sold than PCs for the first time in history. And that's the percent. 600% is the amount of mobile growth in the mobile internet that we've seen over the past 2 years. But really what it means is it's about this guy right here. It's the idiot who bought a smartphone or his workplace gave him one. He doesn't know how to use it. He doesn't know how to hack his way around a mobile website to find what he's looking for. And so really he just wants to be able to find what he wants. He really wants to be able to do what he wants to do. And so we're supposed to cater to him because his user experience is king, no matter what we do. Whether we're developing mobile applications, web apps, or websites, it doesn't matter. So here's the impact if you don't go responsive. 61% of people will leave your site if it's not mobile ready. That means they'll land on your site, it's a desktop site, and they're gone. 61%. 79%, even if they stay, will search for another website if your site's not mobile ready. And these numbers are right from Google. So it tells you that they're watching and they know and they see that that's the case. 50% of people, and this is the number that scared my business manager the most, 50% of existing customers will look outside the business relationship they have with you if your site's not mobile ready. And 48% said they didn't think a business valued their time if they didn't have a mobile-ready site. One number that's not in here that I should probably mention, the latest statistics, this is 2 weeks ago, there was a study that was published, and 84% of people expect their mobile experience on your website to be better or as good or better than your desktop experience. So they expect the very best on mobile. This is a debate that's probably raging in everybody's head right now. Should I do a mobile app? Here's the reason why I normally tell customers responsive design is the way to go. This is the number of app downloads per month versus the number of website visits per day the average smartphone user uses. So as you can see, you're far more likely to experience traffic from a mobile website or a responsive site than you are from an app. I also hear a lot when I talk to potential customers about doing responsive design, well, we look at our analytics and we only have 5% user base on mobile, 10% user base on mobile. And my simple response to them is this: does your website work well on mobile? If not, people will land on it once and they'll never come back to it off their mobile device because your experience sucks. And so West Virginia University, they launched a responsive site, and within the first month their traffic doubled, and now it's almost 50%. Skinny Ties did the same thing. Gravity Department published this on their blog. These are the numbers that they saw in growth in revenue and in growth in traffic based on the fact that they launched a responsive shopping cart. The killer feature, though, the killer number that I think is the most important is this one right here. Even though you would normally equate a responsive site to being more more revenue or more traffic from mobile devices only, they saw a 42% increase in revenue across all devices. And the reason that is when you focus on the user experience when designing a mobile-first responsive design, normally, if you do it right, that improves the user experience across all devices. And so they saw an average of 42% increase in revenue across all devices. So what does it take to make the web responsive? This is what I looked like the first time I made a responsive site. My first responsive site was launched in August of 2010. The phrase was coined in May of 2010. So in that 3 months, I had to figure out what was going on, learn what media queries were, and implement a site. It was terrible. It was ugly, but it still works today, which is absolutely surprising to me. I look back at the spaghetti code that I wrote when I wrote that, and I am so embarrassed that I don't let anybody else at the business maintain that code base. I'm the only one that's allowed to open that project because it's so bad. And so, I don't want anybody, opening and copying and pasting code from there because, hey, this is Josh's site. It must work. It's bad, but it works. It would be terrible. Let's talk about flexible grids. Grid systems are used to create uniform space. And I know you guys, if you've done any web development at all over the past 10 years, the 960 grid system is really the one that most people use. I think you can get 960.gs is where you get that grid system. 12 uniform columns. The CSS looks like this, right? Each column, or each container, you can assign a certain grid number to, which is fine. It works great. And on a normal monitor, 960 pixels was okay, right? Whether you're 1024 by 768 all the way up to the Retina display Apple monitors, 960 pixels sort of worked. And so that was always sort of the key. The problem with that is that this happened. You guys remember when this happened? Yeah? I'm not an Apple guy. Obviously, I don't own an Apple device. I'm about to, but I'm going to put Windows on it. But the reason... It is what it is. What can I say? I remember watching this keynote and had a discussion with my friend about 5 minutes after the keynote was over, and our conclusion to the conversation was that everything had changed. At the time, I owned a Samsung SCHI 760. Do you guys know what device I'm talking about? It was on Verizon. It had a slide-out keyboard, and it had like a half screen on the front with the keypad on the bottom, and it ran Windows Mobile 6, and it was awesome, right? It wasn't awesome, but I owned one, and it was difficult to use the web on, but when I saw Steve Jobs using the internet in the Safari browser on the iPhone, I knew that things were going to change, and that there was going to be widespread adoption of mobile devices. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what it would bring or the changes we'd have to deal with. But looking back, yeah, I was spot on when I thought that things changed, because everything changed. And all of a sudden, 960 pixels wasn't enough. Now we're at 320 pixels. And then this happened. And no longer are we at 960 or 320, but we're at 768. And a mobile site isn't really usable on a iPad. A desktop site isn't really usable on an iPad, especially one that relies on hovers instead of touches. And so there's all these devices. I have Internet Explorer 10 on my Xbox 360 hooked up to my 16-inch plasma display, right? So it's always continuing to grow. The number of devices, the number of form factors are changing constantly. So what is it that you can do now to fix the whole problem of one site instead of having 3 or 4 and maintaining 3 or 4 different sites? The first thing you can do is flexible GIDs. Get rid of pixels, bring in percentages. If you look at all of these devices, no matter what device you're looking at, the viewport's always 100% wide. It's a constant. It's never going to change. And so using flexible grids based on percentages will always be safe. This is the Vistacom site. Everything's based on percentages and M's. There's not one pixel count in this entire site. Reason being, when you zoom, it zooms in and the viewport changes, the layout changes based on your zoom. And so there's some awesome things that have been done here at the Vistacom site to try and make it usable. If you're going to use a grid system and you're using it in SASS, you can do include, or you can include mix-ins, or you can extend these classes, and really you can see every single one of them no longer is based on pixels but is based on percentages. Media queries are awesome because they allow you to have different layouts for different screen sizes. And they're device agnostic, meaning we're not trying to target a browser user agent or a screen size per se, or an operating system or browser capabilities. It doesn't matter. As long as they can render a media query, you can change the layout of the content based on them. This is what they look like. Notice we're using M's instead of pixels. The reason I use M's instead of pixels is exactly what I talked about with the Vistacom site. If you zoom in using media queries or media queries that use pixels on a site, you'll notice that the zooming is kind of wonky in some browsers. The reason is because everything on that site is fluid except for your media queries, which is very weird. And so use M's here. This is just basic math. There are some experimentations you can do to figure out the exact M count for your media queries, but just know that these are fairly safe numbers for your first round of media queries. Awesome. This is the viewport meta tag. This is really important. Basically, this tells the browser that's viewing it that it sets the initial scale to 1 or zoom to 100%, and then it says whatever the width of your device is, that's the width that we're going to use to display. So an iPhone always reports itself as 320 pixels. Even the iPhone 5, if you're looking at it in portrait, it still is a 320 pixel viewport. If you're looking at it on Android devices, those are crazy. I mean, they get very weird. In fact, the Kindle Fire 7-inch reports itself, it's 1280 by 800, and it reports itself at 684 by 421. What? That's the size of the viewport on the Kindle Fire HD. So it's important that we have this set to width equals device width, otherwise we start breaking things. These are other meta tags that you can put in the head of your file. These aren't for smartphones, but for feature phones, or dumb phones, as I like to call them, that don't have actual smartphone operating systems. They're very good for phones like the LG Dare. Do you guys remember that phone? It was really popular with the high school kids back in the day. They're still in use today. A lot of Blackberries honor these because they're not quite smartphones. So, troll. And so yeah, these are important. Make sure they're in there. They're just for legacy support, and in a year or two you'll be able to remove them. If you guys are running Apache, you can put this in the htaccess file. There's also a meta tag and a .NET web config branch that you can put in to do the same thing. What this does, it tells the browser to either, if you're in IE, pull you out of compatibility mode if you're in it, hide the compatibility mode button while you're on your site, and then the Chrome =1 is a little trick. It's a free one that you guys get to take home today if you're not doing it. What it does is if the user has Chrome Frame installed, it will automatically open the site in Chrome Frame. And while the Chrome Frame install numbers are not huge, what Google did about a year ago, and this was brilliant, was they decided to stop developing the Google toolbar for IE. And instead, the last update they made to the Google toolbar is to remove Google toolbar and install Chrome Frame. And so you have a user base now of over 20 million people who have Chrome Frame installed. And here's the killer. They're the people who are stupid enough to still have the Google toolbar installed in IE. And so you sort of help them see that your site's not broken. So throw that in your htaccess file. You can set it. It's just a custom HTTP header. Awesome. JavaScript polyfills. How many of you guys have ever used a polyfill before? Yes, no, maybe so. They're awesome. A polyfill is simply a piece of JavaScript that makes old browsers simulate the capability of new browsers. So anything from local storage to display elements like rounded corners and gradients can all be put into the browser based on JavaScript polyfills. These three here are normally what I load into a browser if the client says emphatically we have to support IE8. I refuse to support IE7 because of the 1.5% user percentage, as well as the other problems that supporting IE7 causes. But if they insist on supporting IE8, not just giving them the mobile view of the website, I load SelectVisor, which puts CSS pseudo-selector support into the DOM. ImageSizer, which fixes IE8's wonky image resizing and simulates responsivity by running a massive amount of JavaScript. Yeah?
This may be a dumb question, but how is this one different from a MODERNIZR?
You can load these via MODERNIZR. MODERNIZR just tests for capabilities and then gives you the ability to load polyfills. The reason you load these before not before MODERNIZR runs, but not in a yep nope, is you get this wild flash of unstyled content if you try and load these polyfills through MODERNIZR. That MODERNIZR, Paul Irish had a blog post a couple months ago where he's like, load these via MODERNIZR, and then a week later there was an update. Don't load these via MODERNIZR because it causes, there's no styling at all. It's just white. It looks like there's no CSS file, and then it flashes to styled. So load these in this conditional statement at the top of the page right below MODERNIZR, and it'll fix most of your IE problems. Awesome. MODERNIZR. It's your best friend. MODERNIZR is awesome. It allows you to test for specific capabilities and then say, if it works, load this JavaScript file and do these awesome JavaScripty things. If it doesn't work, load this polyfill and then do these awesome JavaScripty things. And so it really gives you the ability to tailor the user experience and help older browsers come up to stat. Two more things that it does: the HTML5 shivs, so you can start using readable HTML5 tags and other elements like articles, sections, asides, time. Yeah, those can be used in the older DOM. And it also puts classes on the HTML, so you can really target functionality and style based on browser capabilities instead of user agents or browsers. Reason being, jQuery 1.9 pulled user agent / browser sniffing out, and the reason they did that was because IE11 is using the Firefox user agent. Right? So, no more browser testing, right? You can't anymore be like, oh, you're Firefox. Here, have all this fun Firefox stuff. Because it's just as likely that it's IE11. And so you can't rely on browser sniffing anymore. Okay, so yes, all of this, when you put it all together, way more code. I get that. But the cool part about responsive web design is it really allows you to tailor the user experience based on the capabilities of the browser and the capabilities of the device running it. And the reason I say that is because how many of you guys have a really nice laptop? There are a lot of Apples in this room, so you all have really nice laptops. Some of you have really nice laptops. How many of you guys have a phone that's faster than your laptop? Like your phone processor is more powerful than the x86 processor in your laptop. Not very many of you. How many of you guys have hover support on your phone?
What's hover support?
Like you can hover over something rather than, it doesn't exist, right? And so by designing mobile first, what you're really doing is you're focusing on the device that's more limited. A mobile device has a smaller screen. It normally has a lower resolution. It has fewer input methods. So no more is there a hover or a right click. It's just a touch. The processors are normally slower. The amount of RAM is usually less. And the amount of memory available to the browser and applications is less on a mobile device than it is on a desktop. All that said, when you design mobile first, you pare back your application so you only have the essentials. And then moving forward, you can add based on increased device capabilities. And tomorrow afternoon at like 4, I get into the idea of how to do that, mobile first design and design what's the word am I looking for? Wow. Design principles in general at like 4:30 tomorrow afternoon. And so if you want more about that, you can join me then. We will talk about it then. Awesome. So the question is this magic? Of course not. It's science. Duh. Which is fantastic. Okay, so some things you can do now. Right after lunch, I'm right back in this room, and we're going to get into more implementation details, but just know that this is the future, CSS Flexbox. This was the 2009 syntax, and it changed in 2010 to this, which is wacky. It normally doesn't happen where you change syntaxes completely from display box to display flexbox, and this had CSS functions in it when they were still going to implement real functions in CSS, and then they realized that that won't work because they were pairing most of those back out, and so they changed it again to this, right? And you think, oh great, all the modern browsers support this, we polyfill the old ones and we rock and roll. The problem is that IE 10 shipped with that. And so IE 9, old Firefox, old Chrome, Safari pre 5.1, IE 10, the newest one, Chrome, new Safari, Firefox. So you have 3 different syntaxes you have to support.
What about IE 11, do you know?
IE 11 supposedly has this. Supposedly. I haven't actually gotten my hands on the preview yet to test it, but I believe that they said that this was one of the things they were going to fix. They just couldn't build in the new one to IE 10 yet. But I'm hoping so. And IE 11 will be a mandatory update for Windows 7 users and Windows 8 users on IE 9 to 10. And so they won't be able to say no. And so you'll see this improvement happen very quickly. But the cool part about it is you can still use Flexbox. And it's simply, you just have to use 2 or 3 syntaxes. If you want to, I can show you... this afternoon, I'll show my my SASS mixins, my Flexbox SASS mixins that are all cross-browser compatible, so they work pretty well. So right after lunch, we're going to dive deep into that. Yeah.
You mentioned your SASS mixins for that. Is that kind of stuff in Compass yet?
I have no idea.
Okay.
It probably is, but I am really stupid and did my own, and so. So my guess is that they're available in Compass. So let's talk about responsive navigation real quick. We got about 15 minutes. There are 6 different types of responsive navigation that I have identified. The first one is just simply make your stuff smaller, which is really simplified. And here's the Vistacom site. If you only have 5 or 6 top-level navigation items, you can simply just make them smaller depending on the viewport. They wrap, they're fine, they touch, they're links, and you rock and roll. So that works okay. The next type is block navigation. So you guys know the hardest part about touch is being accurate, right? It's very difficult to accurately touch something when you're working, especially with a smaller mobile phone. My daughter has my old Motorola Droid, right? And this is the one with the slider, the OG. And one of the things that I've noticed on that smaller screen size is that that screen wasn't accurate enough to touch the little links on websites. And so with block navigation is a really good way to address that exact user case. Here we've got Regent College. Their menu here is at the top, and as you can see, they just wrap it down and then they turn it into big square blocks. They're very touchable, they're big buttons, they're hard to miss, and if you need more links, you touch that, and even underneath, their sort of quick links style menu is even big touchable blocks. So that's pretty well done. The next type of navigation is the select element. This one is one that I have been debating with... Whoa, I'm unable to connect to the internet. Hold on, internet. I probably won't be able to connect, which will make me frustrated. But this is one that I've been discussing with some user experience designers from Minneapolis for a while now. We've been debating fairly whether or not you should use the select element for anything but a select element. Do you guys know what I'm talking about, like the little drop-down list? And I don't have a problem with it, especially on mobile devices. And the reason I don't have a problem with it is if you've ever touched one, it opens up this this OS UI that's really nice, and it takes up most of the screen, and it scrolls really smoothly, and the touch areas are massive, and they're very easy to use and very easy to touch. So I personally like them, but they say it causes confusion with the user, so you have to talk about that with your team. But what this does is it's based on a polyfill that Scott jailwrote. And I branched it because it didn't have support for some of the newer browsers, so you can find it on my GitHub if you want it. But it takes your normal menu that's based on nested, unordered lists and turns it into one of these select boxes. And so if you select one of these, it JavaScript fires and it navigates them to where they need to go. So that's a select navigation. I actually like that. The next one is a CSS dropdown. I like this one too. I think that it's awesome, especially the way that Sony is doing it here. When you touch, it scrolls, and then you've got your next level of menu. And you touch, and it scrolls, and you've got your next level of menu. Now here's the thing to remember. On slower devices, that's a really heavy animation. And so you might want to pare that back if you need to, depending on your user profile. But it's a really cool way to do it. And then you touch it, and then it just hides. My content person far prefers the Starbucks implementation of the CSS dropdown. And that's a slightly different use case. That's actually what I like to call a toggle. And the reason I call that a toggle is you toggle it open, you toggle it closed. You toggle it open, you toggle it closed. And it pushes the content down, so the content is never lost underneath the menu. That's the reason my content manager loves this one so much more. She likes her content. The next navigation type is a footer anchor. And this one is self-explanatory. And that is, you touch the menu, it scrolls to the footer where you find the menu. It's a really cool way to do it. And in fact, this is the most accessible way to do responsive navigation. If you guys have worked with accessibility at all, one of the things you know to do is at the top of a page, put a link that's hidden that goes right to the menu, right? Or goes past the menu right to the content. And the reason you do that is because a menu at the top means a person with a screen reader has to read through that entire menu, including all of your titles that you put on your individual menu links. And if you've got a really deep, big menu, that unordered list can take a minute or 2 minutes for that screen reader to read through. And so by moving your menu to the bottom and then just at the top putting a link to the menu, what you're doing is you are enabling them to be able to not be able to skip that navigation if they want to. So that's a really cool and accessible way of doing that. That also means that your menu is down at the bottom, so Google ranks your actual content beforehand. So SEO guys like that too. This is one that I kind of like. This one's modeled more after a native app UI, and that's a side panel. You push it, it opens. You push it, it closes. You push it, it opens. You push it, it closes. Simple navigation, it opens up from the side. That's actually based on Facebook's mobile site and now their mobile apps, where you push the button, it opens up the panel on the left side. And so that's the 6 type. That one,
Evernote does that a little bit too.
Yes, they do.
But it's not as good.
Their mobile site does that? No, their desktops.
I get it on the Kindle and I don't find it to be particularly joyful.
That's too bad. There's nothing worse than a painful navigation. If you do decide to do that side panel navigation, just a UX tip from a guy that does it all day, make it scroll independently. There's nothing worse than scrolling through your menu or scrolling through your content and then all of a sudden your menu's up and gone. Don't do that. Don't do that to your users. Make it fixed. So those are the 6 different types of mobile navigation. Anybody have a question about those before we move on? We're almost finished here today. Any questions?
Do you have the slides available?
They will be on my website, hopefully before the end of lunch at joshbroton.com. You can get them. So check those if you want those. You can jump on there and check them out. There's also a GitHub repository underneath my GitHub called, I believe it's All Day Responsive Web Design or Responsive Marathon. I don't remember for sure. It was an 8-hour responsive workshop I did at Nebraska Code Camp a couple of months ago, and these code examples are all in that. So for all 6 of these menu types.
Will they have the audio as well?
They're recording, so they should have all these videos for you. Awesome. So basically, the TLDR takeaway of this whole thing is that people are ready to use the web now on their mobile devices. Don't wait to do responsive. Don't hold off. Don't delay. Don't just do them. And the first time you're going to do them, what's going to happen is exactly what happened to me. You're going to break things. It's going to suck a lot, but that's okay, right? There are so many gotchas that it's very simple to implement responsive design in Chrome or Firefox. But once you start getting cross-browser compatibility issues going, it tends to get a little complicated, but there's nothing you can't Google. This is WordPress boilerplate that I'm working on. Any WordPress people in here? A few of you? Awesome. Shout out to my WordPress peeps. It's in pre-alpha stage at this point, but if you're looking for all of my SASS mix-ins and CSS, you can find them in that GitHub repository. Any questions? I don't know if that's good or bad. Good maybe? Hopefully? Awesome. Please leave your feedback at that joined in address. I would love to hear what you have to say, any questions that you have. Like I said, go for lunch if nobody has any questions. But I'll be right here after lunch to talk about do actual coding of some responsive layout techniques. We can answer more questions then. And then tomorrow afternoon, I think it's the last session of the day, I'll be talking about user experience, design philosophy, trying to make it easy to understand for people who aren't designers, because most of us aren't. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.